David, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So I'm really excited about your film. And after having made the film and sort of devoted 3 years of your life to it, do you really believe the end of aging is here?
I went into this completely with an open mind because you just start getting all this stuff in your feed, and everywhere
Tell me
you
about
go,
it.
and yeah, and it's just overwhelming. And so the first question that I really asked myself was, well, how much of this is bullshit? How much of this is real? What's the science behind it? 3 years later, I'm I'm pretty blown away
Mm,
by what we learned throughout the process.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it definitely has made me think differently about how fast this revolution is happening right now.
Mm,
The fact that this is really a revolution, it's something that's going to be in the history books, and we're living through it. And sometimes, if you're living through something, it's hard to pull back and recognize what's happening in comparison, to the bigger picture of history. But yeah, I would. Even the most pragmatic of the scientists acknowledge that there's something special that's occurring. As
mm,
Steve Horvath says in the film, the stars have aligned. So
mm. Yeah, we're quite fond of saying that, 10 years ago when I started this podcast, it was, it's very innocent Saturday morning meetups, and we were all doing a bit of grounding and wearing our blue blocking glasses. And now it's sort of taken on a life of its own, if you like. And I wonder, what
yeah.
was your working hypothesis around longevity when you began, and how did that change over time?
Um, my hypothesis was I didn't really have one. I didn't know a lot about it, when we went into it. Um, I really was just curious about, if even the most modest of some of these claims were happening, then that was still quite a big deal.
Mm,
So I didn't go in there with some kind of pre-existing idea that we tried to prove right or wrong. The way that this process worked, which is a little bit different than other people that are making documentaries, is we didn't know where the story was going to take us. So the first interview that we did was at the Buck Institute, and when you walk into this place, I mean, if you've been there before, it's just like a
no.
cathedral. It's this
Mm,
huge, beautiful building, and there's just so many talented people that are inside that are doing this amazing research. That right away, I think, set the tone that, okay, there's first of all, obviously some serious capital that is being invested in the space, but also too, I mean, they're doing so much different types of work, and they're approaching aging as a root cause to so many other diseases, which seems like it makes sense, but it still is quite a radical approach compared to how most people in our infrastructure approaches health, especially in the United States. Um, by the end of the process, I think my hypothesis is that there are fundamentals that really do delay the onset of aging, and these are things that we've been told are good for us. But now that we have biomarkers and ways to quantify how they influence the changes in our body, that we can measure just how impactful they are. And there's so much importance on lifestyle, much more than genetics than we previously thought. That was kind of a big understanding. Number one, that you're not kind of doomed if you don't have the
mm,
best genes. That in many cases, your genes are not your destiny,
mm,
which is something Dr. Eric Verdin says, which I love. The second part is that the drugs and treatments that are emerging in the space, and the acceleration that's happening in these breakthroughs fueled by artificial intelligence, is happening at a pace that's unprecedented. And we can already see so many changes that are occurring and new things that are being released. I mean, in 2026, there's two different companies in the United States that are doing human trials on the first anti-aging drug. Life Biosciences, David Sinclair's company, and Calico Labs.
mm,
This is just absolutely. I think people, you have to pull back and realize, like, okay, this is, at some point definitely in our lifetime, there's going to be anti-aging drugs probably available to the general public. So it did make me a believer in the science. At the same time, things never happen as quickly as people might anticipate. At the same time, sometimes they happen faster. But even the most pragmatic of the scientists we interviewed, they can all agree that aging is something that we can begin to modulate, and it's not set in stone. There are things that we can do to slow down the process. I think that the bigger argument where there's a little bit of tension is whether or not, or how far you can push that, and whether or not we can start surpassing this lifespan capped as a species. And that's also something that we talk about in the film, and that's where it gets quite interesting. That almost becomes a philosophical conversation. Yeah.
Don't die
more than anything else.
For you guys, I guess, and for me as well. I mean, the way that the conversation's moved on over the last 3 years, it certainly helps the content, get interest, doesn't it? Because it's incredible how much of a conversation it is now.
We couldn't have had better timing. And once again, there are these fundamentals that will be just as true in 10 years as they are now. And so our approach to this, the producers of the film, Dr. James Johnson and Dr. Thomas Lewis, they were very involved in the process from the get-go to ensure that the film retained scientific integrity. We're not selling supplements. We didn't have any sponsors. The film was made independently. And because of that, we could let the science help tell the story. And there's also a narrative that we have that's fictional. And it's the story of a person who's living in the near future. And we get a glimpse of what that life might look like if we're living longer than ever expected before, and show that we're still going to face the same human problems, regardless of how long we're living.
So let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it. I obviously mentioned 10 years ago, I remember going to these conferences with Dave Asprey, who would confidently state on the stage 10 years ago, I'm going to live to 180. And we'd sort of think, yeah, right. And even now, when I see Brian Johnson say, don't die, it's within our lifetimes, I think, really? And I'm still, obviously quite deep in this world, but do I think in our lifetimes, aging is going to extend quick enough that we can outpace death? I don't think so. What about you?
The concept of escape velocity, it's a theory, of course. I'm kind of on the fence. There's a couple of reasons for that. The science that I've seen just advance in the last couple of years has really blown me away. So that's kind of made me understand that you can't predict necessarily what's going to happen. And for somebody that lived 100 years ago, if they were to see what life was like today, us doing this podcast, or how long people are living, or being able to travel as fast as we can, and just our day-to-day lives would be completely miraculous and unfathomable to a lot of this, except for the science fiction authors, of course. I hate to put a limit on, I think, what is possible. At the same time, there's also a convincing argument that us as a species have a capped lifespan for what we're capable of. And so how do we bypass the lifespan? Even if we can maintain the health span for a certain period of time, if the body just runs out of fuel, even if you do all of these things, what are the mechanisms that would allow us to raise that limit, of what is approximately 122? And that's a different problem than the one that a lot of the scientists that are in the film are trying to solve. So we do dig into it. I do like the analogy that, if you're a train and there's tracks in front of you and those tracks start to run out, can we build more tracks faster than the train is going? That's essentially escape velocity, with the concept of how AI is fueling a lot of these cures and vaccines and I mean, it is remarkable how many advancements are making on a regular basis. I'm still quite skeptic on the mind aspect of it. Right now, most people's fears are no longer cancer as it was previously. It's now dementia.
Mm.
How do we protect the mind for this period of time? We still don't have a great understanding of how that works. And then you get into some really wild stuff, which is, the Ray Kurzweil philosophy of singularity and trying to, imprint our brains digitally. The film itself is only 88 minutes. We have more than 100 hours of footage that didn't make it into the film, and including some of this stuff that's pretty wild. We were in Japan and we interviewed a guy who's trying to imprint the human brain and map it digitally, which, it's actually someone trying to do it like in a laboratory. So then all of a sudden it's not a theory. It's okay. There's actually people that are trying to do this. That to me was kind of like, okay, this is getting a little bit realer than I had imagined. But that mind question of how do we protect our brain, I think that's really what it comes down to. Even if we can find a way to make our bodies healthier over this period of time, I'm not sure that we've got that sorted yet.
Yeah. But the theory, yes, so the theory is that you're referring to is people don't think, oh, we're just going to get rid of aging in the next 10 years. But what's going to happen in the next 10 years is that we might be able to extend lifespan by another 10 years. And in that further 10 years, we'll get a chance to expand it by another 10 years. And then it'll just become exponential. And then because of that, we're all going to live forever. But it's not just good that we're going to figure it all out tomorrow.
Yeah, that's that railroad track analogy. If something is threatening your body, whether it's some kind of disease, can they find a cure for that before it defeats you? And the idea is that if technology can accelerate fast enough to identify and solve those problems, that in theory, as long as that you're outpacing the disease or whatever ailment you're having, then you could continually go on. There's a lot of really exciting stuff happening. And epigenetic reprogramming as well. And this is really just the beginning of that area of research at this level. And there's a concept called age looping. Have you heard of this before?
No.
So it's in the film. It's in the film as well.
Okay.
This is
well, as I said to you before we started, me and my wife have got it lined up for us to watch for the next week or so. Really, it looks like you tell a great story as well. It's sort of very, very high production values.
Yeah, thank you. We spent, we put a lot. This is, this is about people's worst fears, their greatest hopes, and your health. We took it very seriously. It's not something we took lightly. So we put a lot of due diligence into it, and every single thing in the film was very carefully worked in there. And also the things that we cut out were deliberately cut out. But the concept of age looping is the idea that if you go into a futuristic annual checkup, let's say, and you get your kind of body evaluated, then let's say they would be able to fix whatever's going on and kind of de-age you by reprogramming your genes. And then you would come in again in a couple years and you would go through the same process. So if you started this process at, let's say, 35, and the reason why I say that number is because there was a study that shows if people could pick an age that they would want to be locked, it's usually like mid-30s. It's like you get all the stupid stuff out of the way, and then you're not yet having the things that start happening in your 40s. So let's say you're 35 and you start this process. You go into a lab and robotically it evaluates all of your stuff. It kind of gives you this injection, and now you come back in 2 years and now you're 37, and then it brings you back to 35 again. And could you continually loop? So now you would be living between 35 and 37 continually, physically, biologically. So that's one of the theories that might make this concept of escape velocity more real. And part of it would require a lot of advancement, obviously, in this area of epigenetic reprogramming. So, which is pretty much if you've got a stack of cards and some of these cards are telling your body or DNA what to turn on and what your genes, what's turned on and what's turned off. This is going in and changing the signals. And so as those signals change, then it goes in and just kind of gives you a tune-up. And, there are people that are also working on that and just step by step. But that to me was really fascinating. That to me also seems a little bit more somehow plausible than if somebody's 70 and then now they're 80 and they're slowly just, making sure that they're not dying from whatever's trying to kill them. But instead, you're getting treated at a very young age before that heavy onset of disease and looping consistently. So you have, potentially a world of a bunch of 35-year-old looking people that are actually, in their 70s or 80s. So.
Right. Yeah. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was some of the more outlandish things that you felt that you heard, and if anything really just seemed totally outside the realms of possibility. But as you were talking there, that made me think of the guys who run Mini Circle in Honduras. I don't know, are you familiar with that? That's follistatin. It's follistatin gene therapy. It's where Brian Johnson went. It's experimental, and it is gene therapy, but it's not looping, if you like. But yeah, it's incredible because firstly, it's very untested. And secondly, the owner of the company, he came on, he told me about the follistatin gene therapy, which Brian Johnson had, and that was in the Netflix documentary when he went over there. But then he also said, I'm working on a few other bits. There's a new one, a different gene that I'm working on at the moment. The only person who's been through this so far is me, but I feel great so far. A bit rocky the first month or so. And you sort of think, rather you than me, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, when you watch the film, you'll see that the core kind of cast of our scientists are very much focused on a much different goal, which is increasing health span.
Yeah.
Not increasing lifespan, increasing health span.
And that's our goal.
Their goal is very simply to give you more quality years to spend time with your loved ones. That's what they're trying to do. And the primary driver behind that is to delay the onset of aging at its core, to avoid all of these other things that are a result of that. And so that's a much different basis than trying to live forever or, don't dying. At the same time, I think it's important that you have people that are pushing the limits and that are, having these conversations. It certainly has made a lot more people aware of the science of longevity, but this is a whole spectrum of people that are in this space. And just like any revolution, you've got this cast of characters. And so, and so it's just kind of like, can they all fit even in the same sector? I don't know if you even would call it the same thing. You've got the immortalists, and then you've got, longevity science, and they just have different goals. So as Dr. Verdon says in the film, the CEO of the Buck Institute says, if you're trying to live forever, then I probably would not recommend, studying the science of aging. I'd probably recommend going to church. So I think that seems to be kind of a popular belief amongst some of the scientists that we interviewed. But there's some stuff that's happening that is like a little glimpse of something happening much faster than we had anticipated, and constant studies that are breaking through that kind of are one step at a time, showing that there is some real progress in these different areas. And that's so when it comes to this, the idea of, this radical gene therapies and this kind of stuff, I don't know that much about it personally. So I can't really, I think, talk about it intelligently. But I think as long as people understand the difference between the hard science that people have been working on for decades that really don't get as much attention as, somebody like Brian Johnson, who's got, because it's very interesting to watch, right? It's clickable stuff, and I totally get it. But a lot of the people in the film, I think the general audience has probably never heard of before. And, but I think in the long term, they are going to go down in history as making some huge contributions to, to this whole area that is going to give people more years of their life. And they also argue with each other about some basic things, whether or not aging should be considered a disease. How long can we can we maximize the lifespan? But pushing the limits is part of the process. So I do think it's in general, it's good to have people that are out there with extreme ideas, because then it also puts the other stuff into context. But one of the reasons why we made the film was to shine a light on some of the people who are not getting a lot of this attention. And so now they have a documentary that they're a part of. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and a lot of the most effective hacks, if you like, or lifestyle tweaks for health span they're not particularly radical or even particularly interesting, but going to bed on time, it's the sort of stuff that Brian Johnson does talk about. But it's just interesting, isn't it? Because obviously the way that you've pitched the film is Forever Young. And I wonder if on your sort of 3-year odyssey through this world, it occurred to you a few times that there's a bit of an irony, and I certainly feel it, that, I know that the best way to live a happy life in the moment is to let go and not to try and pursue immortality, but acceptance. And yet that is the one thing that Brian Johnson doesn't talk about. Accepting one's mortality could be quite a good strategy for health span.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's people, to each your own. I mean, some people, I look at, I watched part of the documentary. I actually couldn't make it through the whole thing, but watching kind of his lifestyle day by day, it made me kind of really like sad. It wasn't something that I would ever want to do. I wouldn't want to live like that. I don't find that kind of a high quality of life. But I mean, he's a pioneer in some ways, right? He's exploring new territory, and there's sacrifices that are a part of that. So, there's always two sides to a story, but we do go beyond just the fundamentals in the film. We do go into a lot of the breakthroughs in drugs that are happening, treatments, as well as to where those could lead. And we, have a deeper conversation about purpose and meaning. We know that if you're living longer and you don't have that, kind of what's the point? And that brings up a lot of really crazy questions. If we're living longer than ever before, which we already are, how does this impact relationships? Can a marriage last 100 years? We have to. It's a good question, right? I mean,
of course it is.
That's a good question. We have to rethink pretty much our day-to-day existence is really based upon systems that were created almost 100 years ago, when people were not living this long. Whether it's Social Security, whether it is education, whether it's leisure. A big problem we have right now that we're already seeing when it comes to longevity is people are living longer and they have more time. People are spending more time staring at screens, which we know for long extended periods of time damages brain health. So we know that there's still the highest levels of anxiety and depression and loneliness than have ever been recorded, especially in the United States. So if we don't solve these other problems that are connected to social connection, purpose, meaning, mental health, then all we're really doing is extending a life of misery for a lot of people. And that's just as important as the other kind of work that gets a lot more attention. And that's what we want to have a conversation about as well. You can't, if you could live to 150, let's say you're alive 150, but what does that life look like? And so in our science fiction storyline, we try to show a glimpse of, yes, you can go through this process, you can have everything kind of monitored, but then there's still being human over a period of time. And there's still love and loss and grief and different sets of emotions. And having an understanding of that is necessary if we're going to live longer. And I really would love to see revolutions in other areas of longevity. I think leisure is something that's really not talked about as much as it should be. Yes, there's all these hacks that exist. There's all kinds of drugs that you can take, and these things do work. Some of this stuff that's available, I mean, this stuff's real. Not all of it, especially the stuff that, don't buy your stuff from Instagram. You know what I mean? Like, work with your doctor. But there are just so many things that are happening, but we are getting more time because of, especially with AI taking over more jobs and
all our jobs,
freeing more time for the person. What do we do with that time? So already, without even life being extended, we already are having more time that we have a choice of what to do with it. How do we fill that with time that's giving us a higher quality of life? These are current problems that are happening right now that we're still unable to solve. Those kind of problems, I think, take a lot of cultural and philosophical advancement, and we're not there yet. So the science behind it is happening. The AI stuff is happening, whether you want it to or not. It's there. It's happening. So that's on track. We're behind in some other areas, and we'd love to. I think hopefully the film can inspire people to catch up on just that thought experiment.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that in the context of health and longevity and behavior, because it seems, I mean, especially at the moment, almost every day there's a different story about how AI is sort of eating into the jobs market. And it's gone from a future problem to a now problem, hasn't it? And in a couple of years' time, that is going to be an existential question, because
I think
so many jobs are being lost. Yeah.
I mean, it's happening. It's happening right now. I mean, like, you can.
And what do kids do once they're at the start of their careers? How the hell do they?
Well, I mean, yes, there are these hacks to longevity, right? There's things that you can monitor. There's drugs you can take. There's definitely hacks you can do to extend your health span. We know that, but there's also hacks that people can do in other areas of their life. Reading books and decreasing screen time is a brain hack for your long-term health. It impacts you in a lot of different ways. Reading and writing is something that stimulates your neurons and forces you to think in a way that is good for your long-term health. That's a major way that you can. That's something that we should be doing more of. Of course, it's very hard to do that right now in the world. So it's not, you're working against a mainstream culture that wants to hold your attention all the time. And so you're working against the grain. It's an uphill battle to do that. Another hack for social elements is intergenerational friendships. And there's very little discussion about this. And it's so important to have mentors in your life that are friends that have different perspectives. It's also a solution to two different major problems at the same time. We have an aging population that there's not enough labor shortage to take care of them. And so they're lonely. And then you've got a lot of younger people that are socially isolated, and they're looking for mentorship, and they're also lonely. And so that kind of work that is, I think, really important. That's what I would love to see, is a lot of growth in that area, because in the film, when you do see it, you said earlier, you asked a question like, what's the craziest stuff that you saw? We went to a senior living facility in Tokyo, and Japan is kind of like a near future portrait demographically at a smaller scale of where we are in the West. And so they have a rapidly aging population, and there's not enough young people to take care of them. And so they can't hire enough people. There's a labor shortage of people to take care of the elderly there. And so they've introduced robots into their day-to-day living. And these are little robots that come in and they sing and dance for them. They have pet robots that have like fake fur and stuff like that, like little
What?
dogs. They have little dogs that are
No
walking around.
way.
Yeah, and they pick up the robot dogs and they pet them, and then they
Oh my
purr and they
God.
bark and stuff like that. Yeah, and then they sing and dance and they give them exercises. And so they turn the robot on, they pick a song, and the robot goes out and he raises his hands and they raise their hands and they sing and dance together. And I'm sitting there watching that, just like what in the hell is going on?
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Wow.
Because it did look like it did not look real.
No.
It really did look like I was watching like Black Mirror or something like that. And you
That
can
is
see it all.
extraordinary.
Yeah, and the craziest part is they love this little robot. They love this guy.
Oh my God.
This guy comes out and he turns on, and immediately they perk up, and he leads them through different dances of songs that like everyone knows at their age in Japan, and they're clapping and they're singing and dancing along. And
No way.
like, thank God we're filming this. I mean, this is just that was pretty eye-opening for me, because then you look at the data and you see that is happening in the United States and in the West in general, and it's happening very soon, and it's happening at a scale that's exponentially larger than the country of Japan. So we're not prepared for that. So one of the reasons why I wanted to make the film is because as we were going through this journey, I was pretty convinced early on that the science is legit. It's like, okay, we're going to be able to extend lifespan and, lifespan, maybe a little bit, but health span, mostly. And that's happening. And that's happening faster than I think people had realized it would. And the advancements are just going to keep getting faster because of AI. So like, I'm convinced like that's happening. I learned that pretty early on. The startling thing that I realized was that we're not prepared for the consequences of that. We're just not ready for it. And so how do we get ready for it? I think it starts with having a conversation about it. It's just all across the board. We're really not ready for what's about to happen, of being able to give people a gift of essentially a fourth act of life that we didn't expect, and then not being ready for it and not knowing what to do with that time. That's a really interesting conversation for me. It's fascinating, and I wanted that to be a part of the story because, I think if we can convince the audience as they see these scientists and show the labs and show what's going on, I think they'll also see, okay, like we know this is happening, but what's next? What do we do? Like, great. Now we've got all this time. Retirements aren't meant to be for 4 decades. Our government and the infrastructure is not set up for that. Our healthcare system is not set up for that. What happens? So it's like, this needs to be at the forefront of the public conversation. And
it never is though. I mean, like if all our sort of biggest companies asked what next once we bring in AI for the whole population, it might be quite a different conversation.
Maybe you can text your boy Brian Johnson and tell him to tweet about it, and then maybe it'll get some attention.
Now listen, before you go, I want to ask you about your own habits and maybe in sort of terms of your daily routine, what you were like before you embarked on this in terms of your own health. And then what have you changed? Do you wake up earlier? Do you wear blue blocking glasses in the evening? Do you inject yourselves with peptides at 6 o'clock every evening? What's changed for you?
I won't go into details, but I will say I do one of the 3 things that you just mentioned. I won't reveal which you can probably guess. But so when I first started this journey, have you heard of the aging cliff? There's 2 cliffs that happen. And right now, generally in a human lifespan, you age disproportionately faster at a couple times.
Oh no!
40,
when is it?
Mid-40s is one, and then 60s is another one.
Right.
And so if you're not prepared for that acceleration of aging that occurs, it impacts you for a much longer period of time in the future. So at my age, mid 40s, when I started this, early 40s, I realized that I was about to approach this aging cliff. And luckily I had now the greatest minds in longevity science, available to,
Yeah.
show them my
What do I
blood
do?
work, which
Yeah.
they may or may not have actually enjoyed doing. But, I did go through, and the big change for me was understanding that when you get your blood work, and if you don't already get that, it can be terrifying, because maybe you're scared of what you're going to find, or it's, maybe it makes you accountable. So that can be kind of a scary process if you're not used to it. But when you get your results back, they helped me understand that, normal and falling within considered normal, especially in the West, is not necessarily good. In fact, it might be sick. Most Americans are sick in many ways. So you can't compare things against like, oh, okay, this is normal, so you can ignore that. So they look at more things of how to optimize these different areas and for your particular body and your particular life. I was going to the gym. I've always gone to the gym. Haven't had an issue with that, but I definitely was not as healthy as I thought I was. And so this was very much a wake-up call. And I have made a lot of changes in my life as a result of making the film, that all are involved a lot of consultations, with a lot of different people who I trust medically, who are, have the credentials and able to do that. But I've always been an early riser. I haven't had problems sleeping. I think especially all parents know, if you have a kid, it's kind of easy to get sleep these days. But for me, the travel has always been difficult because, I've been to, more than 40 countries in the last 10 years, filming all over the place. And now I've kind of prioritized only travel when necessary, and trying to find ways to, have better track of my circadian rhythm. But for me, the big change was inflammation. I had a lot of inflammatory issues that I didn't know what that was until I made the film and learned about what they call inflammaging, which it's hard to, but you can notice huge changes once you start to deal with that. Now, there's a lot of different ways to reduce inflammation, through different drugs, through different treatments, through lifestyle changes. I've also changed the way that I exercise. I think, feeling like you're going to the gym, it's not the same what you do there. It's like, you can't just say, oh, you go to the gym. You have to be very deliberate with what you're doing. And there's a huge wake-up call was when I worked out with Dr. Johnson, who's in the film. This guy's almost 80 years old, and his personal trainer comes in his garage, and like, this guy's like, he's doing a 3-minute plank. You know what I mean? He's like all in.
Yeah.
He's doing high interval training. And I'm like, okay, if he can do this at his age, I found that to be hugely inspirational. And he takes it seriously. And, he is a very inspiring person to be around. And also that goes back to the idea of intergenerational friendships. Having somebody that is a retired surgeon who's huge believer in this stuff. I mean, whether it's, investing in biotech companies or, making this film happen or just ultimately really pushing the science forward. It's somebody who's actually living the lifestyle. They're not trying to sell you a supplement. They're trying to show you through their actions that the science is real, and there's more that you can do on a daily basis, which I think is empowering. And you need to be accountable, like start taking your own life seriously. And that's pretty much what he said to me, like start taking your life seriously, your health seriously.
Yeah.
And so that was those are the major transformations that I've made. But I mean, I'm by no means, some kind of extreme biohacker. I'd say I'm more on the, I'm a believer in the science, but I'm probably somewhere in the middle and much more kind of a pragmatic.
Well, that's most of the people who listen to this podcast. So that's great. David, it's great to chat to you. Where can people find the film?
They can watch it right now directly at foreveryoung.film. This is kind of an advanced preview before we do a wide release through major streamers in May. We also have a great Substack, which digs into a lot of really fascinating topics with a fresh approach. And so you can also find a link for that on our at foreveryoung.film as well. And for people that really want deep dives into some of these topics that range from the super scientific to the humanist side of things, the philosophical, the existential, we cover it all. And I mentioned earlier this library we have of 100 hours of footage. We are also slowly digging through that to find some, gems of wisdom and releasing that slowly but surely as well.
Great. Yeah. Well, that's extra content for you. It's just digging through it.
There we go.
And it's all screen time. That's the problem.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, there's a podcast function. So on Substack, so everything can be.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Well,
there's one exception. They can watch your podcast all day. That screen time is good. That's okay.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. David, so good to talk to you. Thank you for coming on. Really, really good luck with the film. And as I say, it's on our watch list for the next week or two, and then that'll be brilliant once it's streaming everywhere as well. So yeah, well done with everything, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.